I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have no one that's signed up to speak this evening, so we'll move forward to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think we're missing all those in attendance. Everyone is here with the exception of Dr. Stallo and Jeff Holmberg, who hopefully will be joining us later. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So made.
By Stacy? Second?
Second.
By Michael? Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. On our consent agenda this evening, these are items that are routine in nature and will be enacted in one motion. We have the financial statements, approval of school board minutes, and resignations as listed, and the designation of the second identified official to access MDE secure website. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So made.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Jonathan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Resolution for the acceptance of gifts. We have two donations, one through the Wells Fargo Grant Program and the other through the Prior Lake Savage Optimist Club. Do I have a motion to accept the resolution for the acceptance of gifts?
So made.
By Mary, second by Enrique. That takes a roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
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 And that passes 7-0. On to Laker Pride. And this evening, I believe we have Ola Delago. You don't need this, will you be up there, Richie?
We'll be both.
Okay. Just to introduce a little bit, the Ola Delago Positive Behavior Intervention System, PBIS team, has worked diligently this year to implement PBIS at their school. Ola Delago is part of a PBIS cohort 14, which includes 17 other metro area schools. We are just completing year one of the 2-year implementation journey. They're excited and proud to share with us this evening their progress thus far in their initiative.
Please, members of the board, thank you for having us here. We will be brief. We were intentionally brief. We have a few slides to share with you, but as we mentioned, we are part of a cohort 14, which is about 14 other metro schools around the district, ranging from the high school is actually part of that initiative as well. And we meet the 2-year implementation journey. We are the last elementary school, because we're the newest elementary school, but the last one in Prior Lake to go through this process. We are in year one of a 2-year implementation. We are thrilled to see what we have, and we're going to highlight our expectations called the waves. We have part of our PBIS team here, they'll introduce themselves, and we also have our students that will speak as well.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Bauer. I am the school social worker at La Ola Delago, and I'm also one of the co-coaches for our PBIS team this year. Our fabulous PBIS team has attended multiple statewide trainings this past year and has worked hard to bring this vision to life. One of our first tasks was to create a school-wide behavior matrix that reinforces positive behavior throughout all areas of our school. In order for all of our stakeholders to understand our expectations, the matrix was created in both English and in Spanish. And we decided on the acronym WAVES, La Ola, as a way for parents, students, staff, and community members to be able to remember what we value most in our building.
So we decided to hand out waves tickets, las olas, bolletas de las olas. And our students so far in the last 2 weeks have earned almost 1,000 tickets. And their behavior has, all I have to do is say, muéstrame las olas, and the behavior changes like that. They're going to now introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about it.
So we have 4 students to go over the 4, let's describe what WAVES means. The W is for worker, A is for accountable, VE is together for value everyone, and S is for safe. So we have 4 students to talk about how they demonstrate these characteristics.
Just talk loud.
Elsa, yo soy trabajador. Hello, my name is Elsa, and I am a war girl and I listen.
When we were practicing for this, first of all, good job, kiddos. We only had a couple people in the room, so we didn't have this audience to practice. So really impressed with these students. We're really impressed. We'd invite any board member to stop by anytime, and we'd be happy to talk with you more about Lola del Lago and the waves. So thank you, and if you have any questions, feel free to let us know.
We have one more Laker Pride this evening, and this is for one person who gets to sit at our table every month. So Charlotte Huntington, would you come up here, please? We want to thank you for your service as the student rep this year on the board. It's been a long year, and I'm sure you're excited to be done and move on. And I'm going to ask you to maybe tell everyone what your future plans are.
All right, next year I'm going to Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut, and I'm studying business management in the honors program as well as playing Division I hockey there.
If you're serving on the board this year, you can take your nameplate home. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And I have a placard. Next on our agenda are personnel items, and I'll turn it over to Jim Quirm.
Good evening. We have several personnel items starting on page 211 on your board packet. The first one would be candidates for employment. We would request that the board take action on the candidates as listed in the board packet.
Do I have a motion to approve the candidates for employment?
So made.
By Mary, second.
Second.
By Stacy. Any comments or questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
Next personnel item would be 8B, approval of a district retirement. We have one retirement. Wanda Ryan is retiring after 22 years of service. She'll be honored at the district retirement celebration on May 16th, and we would request that the board approve the following, that retirement.
Do I have a motion to approve the district retirement for Wanda Ryan?
So made.
By Melissa, second.
Second.
By Michael. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
8C is approval of leaves of absence. There are 3. We would request that the board approve those 3 leaves of absence.
Do I have a motion to approve the 3 leaves of absence as listed?
So made.
By Mary,
Second.
second by Enrique. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
8D is additional staffing for next fall for licensed special ed staff. Just a note here, some of the parts of this FTE are already in place as we hired people to fill additional need this year, and then we would need to hire them back and have it as a permanent. So that 3.1 is a combination of some current plus some additional for fall based upon student need.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the additional staffing for 2019-20 licensed staff?
So moved.
By Stacy, second by Jonathan. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
And finally, 8E is a resolution approving benefit administration. We're making some changes to hopefully improve our experience for our employees and who our vendors are. And the vendor requires a resolution from the board, basically because there's a change in trustee.
Do I have a motion to approve the resolution approving benefit administration?
So made.
By Mary? Second?
Second.
By Jonathan. Any comments or questions? Stacy?
Does this go through committee or like any type of committee as far as, you know which committee I'm talking about? I'm sorry. Insurance committee or?
Insurance committee?
Yeah.
No, we did do some RFPs for these so that we were just not happy with our current vendor.
Okay. All right.
Any other comments or questions? I have a motion and a second. That's a roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Jonathan? Stacy? Me, aye.
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 That motion passes 7-0. Thanks, Jim. There is no unfinished business this evening, so we'll move right on to new business. The Strategic Direction 1, Kevin Schuttender and team. 1F, actually.
Good evening, Chair Shimmick, board members, community members. I am here today to give you an update on some of our work with E12 literacy in the district. This work began 2 years ago, stemming from Strategic Directive 1, that is focused on increasing measurable student growth and achievement. And the priority work statement was to conduct a comprehensive study and review of E12 literacy research, best practices, current district resources, and practices to conduct and recommend and make recommendations for systematic improvement. So we began the process by really reviewing our standardized and classroom assessment data to look at the outcome of our current program. We had input from our elementary ELA committee, a survey of teachers in terms of their practices and competencies with literacy practices. We compiled observation data, and we also had input from our building principals. We identified some strengths and weaknesses in our current practices and resources, and then we determined some areas for further resource needs, some areas for professional learning and development for our building leaders, and professional development for our teachers. With elementary, we have been working with a literacy consultant to really identify some literacy best practices and bring some professional development for our principals to help them lead literacy practices in their buildings. So since February 2018, we've conducted 293 literacy classroom visits. This is an intensive walkthrough that our elementary principals have learned, and they conduct together with other elementary principals to really do the work together and to really see what are some of the practices that are happening in our classrooms and some of the ones that need a little bit more support. We've analyzed those patterns across the district and across buildings to really get an eye into our culture and effective instructional practices in our classrooms. And we've identified some areas for professional learning and support and made some systematic processes to bring that support to teachers in a really laid out systematic way. Since then, we've also piloted 2 phonics programs, one's by Teachers College and one from Fountas and Pinnell. And we are just working now to get the end-of-year data from MAP, MCA, Ames, and Fountas and Pinnell to really determine the efficacy of both of those pilots to determine what are our next steps. We know it's an area of need, and we know it's an area that we want to address soon. Our foundation for continuous improvement, our elementary principals have really taken this by the horns, I would say, and they have really worked really collaboratively together to really build a strong culture of literacy teaching in our district. They have done professional development with teachers from other buildings. So at recent professional development days, let's say one elementary principal might work with all of our first grade teachers and another might work with all of our fourth grade teachers to really build that culture of this isn't just work that we're doing in one building, but this is work we're doing across our buildings in the whole district. We have lit labs that bring professional development to our teachers every month. We also have Workshop Live, which is a job-embedded teacher observational professional learning program that's really built off the instructional rounds model. We've updated our reading units of study resources that have increased the rigor and increased some of the background and connections for our teachers. And we've also integrated writing units of study. That we've seen some pretty tremendous growth in our students' writing over the last 2 years. And we're going to continue with that LCV model to just really deepen and continue the work of getting to know best practices in literacy in every classroom. This is just a quick look at some of the work we've done. So when you look at this, this is data from walkthroughs that principals have done, as I mentioned, and this is a look at some of the pre-data. So at the beginning of the year, we could identify in that bottom right graph that learning targets and demonstration of learning was really an area for growth that we wanted to help our teachers get better at. So we had some really systematic professional learning and development. And from the first round in fall of 2018-19 to the last round in spring, we've seen some strong growth with teachers using these practices. We've also seen teachers start to use some small groups to focus better on students' individual needs. So we're seeing those trends start to increase in terms of more small groups being used, more partner or focused instruction based on students' needs and strengths. And we plan to continue this. It's really given us a strong foundation to both collect and analyze data and then turn it around quickly into professional growth and change. So this model has been working pretty well for about 1.5 years, and we plan to continue it. We plan to explore additional Tier 1 supports. And as we get the results of our MTSS audit that we've been conducting for the last year, we really are looking for ways to align and embed some of the recommendations from that in our overall literacy program and vice versa into the MTSS program. So that might make some recommendations for us in terms of Tier 2 supports and Tier 3 supports in literacy. In secondary, we have since spring of last year been conducting a review of our ELA curriculum, and that has been done by a team of elementary, middle school, and high school teachers. And it starts by really reviewing current practices. We did a pretty deep data dive with our ELA curriculum committee, looking at all of our output data. So looking at grades, course enrollment, MCA, MAP, ACT, all of those output indicators, and really taking a look and thinking about what are some of the influences we have in terms of ELA curriculum and pedagogy in those output indicators. So if we see trends we don't want to see in terms of gaps in achievement or in terms of gaps in course enrollment, we're thinking about the ways we can shift some of those trends based on our work. We are beginning the shift towards student-centered personalized learning and continuing that with secondary. And we've also developed some guiding principles for resource selection. So really viewing this through an equity lens and getting the voice of students in terms of what they read and how they experience ELA in our district, and making sure the curriculum reflects our students in our classrooms. In phase 3, this year and into next year, we plan to continue that professional development and continue the development of standards-based aligned units for ELA and secondary. Some secondary literacy strategies that are highlighted in our SKIPs this year. In middle school, students will read for 15 minutes a week. They're using text-dependent questions to help our students really bridge the gap from reading to application. And at the high school, they're really doing some focus work on reducing failure rates, specifically in ELA and other areas, and increasing that focus on using formative assessments to help students to diagnose whether students are learning the content or not, and help them learn it before it gets too late in the quarter or the semester. And at Bridges, they are on the tail end of implementing a multi-year content area literacy plan that has really served them well for embedding literacy strategies in all their content areas. Any questions?
Are there any questions? Mary?
Yes, you mentioned in the elementary section, the slide 1, you mentioned that there was a consultant of, that was utilized. I don't remember any consultant, but was there a name or is
Dr.
it
Bonnie
ongoing?
Hauk, she has a book called Literacy Unleashed, and it's really hinges on that LCV model, that literacy classroom visit model, where it's a structured walkthrough for principals and instructional leaders to get an idea what are some of the best practices happening in our classrooms. She also did some professional development for our principals to help them deepen their foundational knowledge about best practices in literacy. That was last year.
And is it ongoing? Is it
Nope.
just a short period of time?
That was a short period of time, really winter and spring of last year. I want to say 5 meetings with our principals and her to really, again, build their capacity, teach them how to use the tool, the LCV tool, and then get it into action, work into implementation.
Thanks.
Mary?
Couple of questions here. You mentioned that you're looking forward to the end-of-year MAP assessments and the results from those. Do you have any idea when the board will be able to see that?
So preliminary scores are beginning to be released, but they're not publicly released until last year. It was August. So I'm expecting late July or August again.
Would that be enough time to inform any changes in the program for the following year?
Possibly. It gives us, when we really triangulate MAP, MCA, again, Fountains of Pinnell, and we really look at some of the other information we've learned from our MTSS audit too, that's come from teacher surveys, interviews, a lot of those other pieces. A big part of our next work is getting teams around all of that work and looking at all the data kind of holistically and making our action plans and our implementation plans for the next few years.
Okay. One of the things that caught my attention, you mentioned trying to influence shifts in course enrollment, particularly with regards to ELA. How would that happen, particularly at the high school level, or do you have an idea yet?
So, I've seen some examples from other districts, and sometimes ELA tends to shift more female, especially our honors and AP courses, and science and math tend to be the flip. So it may just be about thinking about what are the core resources, what are some of the books they read, what are some of the resources they use, and who do they broadly appeal to, and then kind of making that well known. And just, some of it is gentle nudges from the teachers being like, oh, you might love AP English, or, guidance from our guidance counselors. So there's a lot of elements to how students select their classes. But I think one of the things we can look at is if we have, a disparity, and if we think there might be something behind it, whether it be due to gender or socioeconomic status or race or culture, what are some of the influences we have in the classroom and with our resources that can affect it for the better?
Any other questions?
What kind of feedback are you getting from the teaching staff?
In elementary especially, they're doing the LCV model really heavily and really intentionally for the past year or so. And what we're hearing is that teachers really appreciate the support through Workshop Live. And that's a model where teachers are really collaborating together in their teams to implement a lesson and then give each other feedback on it and really use that to grow. Teachers like that our elementary principals especially are in their classrooms more, observing literacy and giving them feedback, giving them formative and intentional feedback on, hey, I saw this was great, maybe we're going to work on this, and then using what they're seeing in the classroom to direct the next wave of professional learning. So, we've heard that teachers appreciate the attention and the intentional attention, I guess is the way to say it, about really focus on literacy. It's a challenging area. It's a challenging but incredibly important area, as we all know, especially in elementary.
Any other questions? Enrique?
Yeah, in the elementary section, in the what we have done since February 2018, you mentioned that you've piloted 2 phonics programs with an opportunity for a third. Can you kind of describe that process of how these different phonics programs are used and in what circumstances?
Yeah, you know, one of the things we did at the very beginning of this process too is we really surveyed other comp districts around us in the metro to see what kind of resources they use, what supports or practices they've used. And so one of the things we pulled out of that is really got a look at their core resources and some of their phonics resources, and then did some research on the efficacy of a couple of different resources that we know people have used and or are aligned with our current resources and curriculum. And so we had members of our ELA committee pilot these resources. We purchased them and asked them really to follow some guidelines about when they started, and then looking at both kind of formative data along the way in terms of Ames Web and other measures. And then as we finish up the year, we're going to look at some of that summative data and see whether it is starting to make a difference. One of the things we are also very intentional to look at is teachers' qualitative data, I guess I would say, is, you know, their comments on how easy it is to use, how much time it takes to implement, how much prep time it might take, because we know it could be the best resource in the world, but if it takes too much time to implement and it's not easy to implement or not capable of being, it won't make a difference. So we're really looking for that sweet spot that has a strong research base and is efficacious with our learners, but also doesn't require a great deal of additional time in order to implement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is a strategic direction for expand and embed environmental focus across the district, 4B. That's a whole group, or is it just Joe?
All right, good evening, Board Chair Shimmick and board members. My name is Joe Kabushek. I'm one of the assistant principals at Prairie Lake High School. This is Sue Moan, our district naturalist, and we'll be talking about our strategic direction focused around our environmental education. If you think about the strategic direction that we used at the beginning of this school year, 18-19, it focused on expanding and embedding environmental focus. Now, we'll talk a little bit later that has changed and will be changed for our upcoming school year. But that led us to our priority work around 4B, which asked us to go ahead and conduct an internal audit of our current environmental practices. Where are we at? And then being able to share those results with stakeholders and develop a 3-year plan for eSTEM moving forward. And so what I'm going to do is pass over to Sue now, and she's going to explain kind of our initial survey that we provided with our sites and start talking about some of the results that we had.
Yeah, thank you. This way? Thank you. All right, so since we are a green ribbon school district since 2013, we turned back to that idea of using the 3 pillars of the green ribbon schools as to how to evaluate our current practice. Pillar 1 has to do with reducing our environmental impact and the costs of that. Pillar 2 is improving health and wellness, and Pillar 3 is providing the environmental and sustainability education. So Pillar 1, we asked, having to do with the environmental impact, what systems the buildings had in place to really address or improving our recycling and composting habits. We are pretty good, but we want to know what are we doing to even get better? And then also what were we doing to reduce our energy consumption and improve our efficiencies? And what we learned is that while we were pretty good, we don't have a consistent education at all of our sites. Some sites did one thing and other sites did something else. And so we decided that if we could develop instructional videos around the recycling, composting, and energy consumption in our schools and provide those twice a year to every site, that might help bring up our practices in all the buildings. We also wanted to connect it to our PBIS, our positive behavior interventions. And so that this goes with, like, we are PLSAS, we are wise stewards of our resources. The other thing that we are going to be doing, we already have made connections, is with our Scott County Environmental Services to provide consistent labels and sorting tables for our our lunch rooms at all the buildings. Sites also asked if we could provide them with more quarterly data so they could see how they are improving throughout the school year as they make some changes. And then also wanting to look at that shift so that in our middle school and high schools, they can improve some of their organics composting as well. In Pillar 2, improving our health and wellness, we asked our sites what programs do we have in place that incorporates best practices to promote both our staff and student health and wellness. And this is an area we found out that we did pretty well in. We have high levels of health and physical education instruction and wellness committees for our staff at every site. We don't have the one thing that we really noticed, that we don't have consistent ways to maintain our outdoor spaces. We have beautiful spaces at all of our schools, but we want to make sure that those places are maintained from year to year, and as children go up throughout their grades, if one class left and it was like a garden they might have started, we still want that garden being taken care of and who's going to be filling in the gaps. So we are recommending and working on developing a sustainability plan for outdoor learning spaces and gardens at all of our sites, and create that common expectation. And again, tying it to who we are, what do we expect of all learners, and this is something, ways that we can show that we value our environment.
And our third pillar focuses on our environmental and sustainability education. And so for this, we went ahead and started with our district's E-STEM definition. And you can see it listed there, talking about an interdisciplinary approach of instruction and learn focus on inquiry of real-based problem solving in the 21st century, applying hands-on science, technology, engineering, and mathematical practices with projects and field experiences related to the environment. And when we went ahead and started talking to our various sites within the district, a couple things that we found is, first of all, we have some inconsistency around that definition itself. And so one of the things that we found, for example, at the secondary level, our secondary has really focused on the interdisciplinary approach, but not as much on how we can embed environmental practices into the STEM component. The other thing that we talked about is that we have kind of taken those STEM components and separated them out. If you look at our priority work, we do a great job of looking at the science, the technology, the engineering, and the math separately, but we've kind of broken them out. And we've also found that our staff are looking for ways that they can gather additional information. And so the recommendations that we have is we want to go ahead and look at that definition and see if that definition still fits where we are today. We've actually already started this a little bit with our secondary administrators within the last week or so. We've started having them reviewing from their own sites. What are they doing? What do they want the experience for their students to be coming in and going out from each building and each level? And so that we can look at how we can make that happen. That will allow us to have a more consistent message and definition of around what E-STEM means at each site as well as at our district. And we're going to be able to do that by going ahead and incorporating the E-STEM into each building skip, their school continuous improvement plan, so that it becomes something that each building does and is part of their work. Do you have any questions?
Are there any questions from the board? Excited that you're continuing the work.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to Strategic Direction 5, Integrating Technology for Teaching and Communication, 5A. Marcus and group.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Mark Paulson. I'm one of the assistant principals at Prior Lake High School, and Marcus will be joining me just to give you the update on the Priority 5A work. I'm just going to get this called up here. Okay, thank you. So tonight what we're going to do is just kind of share with you the work that we've done related to 5A, the stakeholder input that we collected, the findings from that research, and then also the recommendations that we have based on that. So we kind of identify our current reality, and then what are the things that are going to get us to our identified ideal reality. So our work right now is aligned to the strategic vision, integrating technology for teaching and communications. And that was broken into 4 paths, 2 of which Christy Mussman and her team addressed last year, specifically around the use of social media for communication and also for our broad communication tools around phone and text messaging. What we dug into is that fourth one, which is what we call our Tier 1 tools, and I'll get into that in a second. But these are tools that students use in the classroom, and teachers use these to support the students around accessing information, finding resources, completing work, and then also communicating students' progress back to the student and also to the parents and guardians. The way we are talking about technology in the district is we've broken them up into 3 tiers. Tier 1 are those tools or utilities that we expect all teachers to be using at certain levels. The district has made a fairly substantial, financial investment in these, and we want to make sure we're utilizing them to the fullest capacity. Tier 2 would be a department-specific tool. So say in the art department they use Adobe Photoshop. That's something that they use specific to their curriculum. We don't expect all teachers to be using Adobe. And then Tier 3, we don't want to stifle innovation, so we still want teachers going out there and looking for tools that they want to use in the classroom. But the rule kind of guiding all this is that Tier 2 and Tier 3 can't supplant Tier 1. So we expect teachers to be using Tier 1, departments to be using their Tier 2, and then teachers have that option to look for innovation and different tools they want to use. The team that I was working with was composed of Barb Yetzer, elementary principal, John Dahl, an assistant principal at the middle school, myself, Marcus, Christy Mussman, Kevin, and then our 4 technology integration specialists, Amanda Fay, Elizabeth Layton, Christopher Shiner, and Ken Clam. And our ultimate goal when we started this was to identify student and parent need, and then make sure we're aligning teacher practice and administrative expectation. That was the framework of the lens that we looked at when we started this work. The stakeholder input that we collected, it really started with parent comments from the 17-18 survey. And then from there, that kind of generated our areas of interest, and then we interviewed students at all 3 levels, grades 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. And then we also did what are called 5 empathy interviews at each level. And just real quick on that, an empathy interview is just an opportunity to have a deeper conversation with somebody about a given topic. A written, prescribed online survey can oftentimes be narrow in scope and focus, which can be good, but at the same time, it can sometimes miss a deeper narrative that might be happening. And so those interviews were done just to make sure there wasn't anything that we were missing in our questioning, to make sure we were getting the authentic student experience. And then from the staff perspective, all the building instructional leadership teams were given a survey, and then also a list of questions that they could provide additional written comments to, and then at built meetings have conversations about it as well. So parents, students, and staff. So starting with the parent feedback, what we saw was that 95% said they strongly agree or agree that they're satisfied with the communication. But what was also noticed is that slightly over 25% of the parent comments were related specifically to those Tier 1 tools, Schoology, Infinite Campus. And their comments, were related to, frustrations or concerns they had. And so we felt like that was enough that we should dig into this deeper and see what was going on there. So we looked at all those comments, we kind of categorized them, read through them. And what they all seem to fall into one main theme, which was basically, what can I expect to see, where, when, and how? That they all fell into some component of that statement. So, that was our starting point. From the student side, we really focused on the tools that they were going to be using. So at the elementary, they use Seesaw a lot, Infinite Campus a little bit maybe, and then G Suite or the Google platform. And we looked at 3 pillars really. We looked at what are they using it for, because we want to see if they're using it for, what we had hoped they would be using it for in the implementation. What do they like? So those are the things we want to keep doing. And then what were their areas of frustration? Because that's where we're going to find what do we need to do differently, maybe what do we need to stop doing. And you'll see in some of the data, sometimes there's some interesting things like under frustrations for Seesaw, you'll see 35% it's miscellaneous. What that really meant was these are things that were unrelated to Seesaw. Like a number of students said, typing is hard. That's a real valid frustration. We don't want to dismiss that, but it's not really unique to the platform in and of itself. My favorite comment here from a student was seesaws are frustrating because you need 2 people. You know, so not sure they necessarily. So, you know, it was an interesting read sometimes. But, you know, overall though, you know, it was encouraging, like students love that their parents can see their work. They're using it to collaborate. They're taking ownership of their own learning. So that, you know, we just categorized their feedback and looked for trends. And we did this at all levels with all platforms. And I don't want to go into all of them because, you know, the data is there for you to see. And we'll have a summary statement kind of at the end that pulls us all together. So we did the same thing with G Suite, which is the Google platform. One thing we learned is that having common language is really important to this because you'll see it even more pronounced at the higher levels. But you'll see, like here, is 23% say they don't use G Suite, but 83% say they create slideshows. And what we found is that they're familiar with Google Slides, Google Documents, but that term G Suite, which is new to Google, they didn't know what that meant. And so, you know, there's that little hiccup in the data there, but we, you know, I think with the other pieces we have a fairly clear understanding of where the kids are coming from. Then the built feedback for the elementary teachers were, I think, aligned with some of the parent frustrations. You know, too many notifications and avenues for communication that leads to redundancy, can sometimes lead to inaccuracy. They would like more support on the tools. And then also just guidance on who should be communicating what and when. You know, there's a lot of opportunities to communicate, but sometimes over-communicating isn't necessarily good either. We want to have streamlined communication. And then we did the same thing with middle school students, specifically related to Schoology, again, Infinite Campus. Again, we're seeing high utilization for exactly the kind of things we want students to be using these for. But there are some, you know, things in there that we can look at to improve our practices. And we'll talk a little bit about that more towards the summary. Infinite Campus, again, this is the student information system. So Schoology and Seesaw, those are the tools that classroom teachers use to create online classes that students would log into, access their resources, turn in homework. Infinite Campus is our student information system, so that's where all of our parent contact information is. And it is actually our ultimate record of student achievement. So at the end of their high school career, their transcript comes from Infinite Campus. So that's the tool we use for that. And then also, the Google Suite, we took a look at their uses there. And the built feedback from the middle school, I think you're going to see a lot of parallels to what the elementaries had. Again, what's essential information? You know, what do we want to push out versus what do we want to post? In other words, you know, there are people that are going to want different levels of engagement. How do we satisfy both groups, you know, effectively? And then that idea of managing 2 platforms, just a quick example of that would be like Schoology has a grade book, but that's not the official grade book. And so teachers might use that differently than Infinite Campus. And so a parent is going to see 2 different grade books and wonder which one is real. And so, you know, that might be a situation where less might be more, you know. And so we want to take a look at that and figure out what's essential and what's helpful. So moving on. And then high school, same thing, looking at Schoology. You will notice that, you know, as we went up in the levels from elementary to high school, you know, one of the frustration areas would be things like, you know, is it up to date? Is it current? You know, are students able to find what they need? As students become more autonomous, maybe, you know, they're doing this more on their own and they're going to feel some of that frustration a little bit. So again, just things for us to look at and plan for on how to improve. Infinite Campus, again, you know, one nice thing is 98% of the kids said they're checking their own grades. So again, you know, it's nice to see students taking ownership of their learning to make sure that things are happening the way they thought they were. One thing I can't help but notice is that one of the great likes about Seesaw for the elementaries was that parents can see their work, and one of the frustrations of Infinite Campus is parents can see my grades. So there's kind of an evolution that seems to happen there. So, and Google again, you know, they're using it. One thing that I found nice is, you know, about half the students were saying, you know, they're using it for collaboration, which is one thing we really wanted to see. So that was nice to see in the data. And then built feedback, no surprises. Again, you know, a lot of communication channels, a lot of opportunities for miscommunication, those sorts of things. So from there, as an administrative, we kind of compiled all these things, put them together, and these were our findings. One, the infrastructure is very stable, and there's very few complaints about performance. So that's really good to see in a district where you have one-to-one. At the high school, you have 2,800 students hitting a system. Very, very few complaints about performance of the actual network. And overall, students are very happy with the tools that they have access to. What we are seeing in the frustrations, parent, student, and teacher frustrations are in alignment, which I think, actually makes, when we look for solutions, actually, it helps in that. But too many communication channels leading to redundancy or conflicting information. Are the resources being used consistently? And then providing additional supports. I think we do a good job on the front end at the beginning of the year, but then what do we do for parents ongoing? For a student, Schoology is easy because they're using it every day. If I'm a parent who's logging in once a month, that's a much different story. So how do we support people and families that are joining, Prior Lake High School mid-year or mid-career? How do we support them? And then we need to review and update existing expectations, just to make sure that teachers are really clear and feel supported in terms of what are the expectations. Our plan from that then is we have a 2-year plan. We're going to develop and implement that staff expectations. We'll be doing that in conjunction with the BILT, make sure we have a common understanding. We want to standardize communication at the different levels. So elementaries, obviously there's more elementary buildings, so that's going to be a much different lift for them than it is for us at the high school. And then one of the pieces that came out of this is in part of the conversations is we realized that, and this came from that G Suite issue where we realized kids didn't understand what that meant, is looking at standardizing almost a proficiencies curriculum so that if I'm a 5th grade teacher, I know what proficiencies I should expect my students to have in terms of using Google, using Seesaw, using those sorts of things so that it reduces the redundancy. If I'm a 5th grade teacher and I have a third of my students who can do one thing but not another thing, by having that map, we can ensure some consistency. And also that'd be a great support for kids who are joining our schools later. We can say, hey, these are the things students need to know how to do. How are you doing on these things? Where can we support you? And then year 2 then will be implementing that curriculum map. And then specifically related to the other plans then is continuing to collect feedback from students and parents on the changes that we made and make sure that we have fidelity of implementation. Are we actually doing what we said we were going to do? So that's the second year of the plan. So any questions?
Any questions from the board? Mary?
Consistently, one of the frustrations that I hear as a board member from the community, and I personally experienced, is that, that the communication channels, when they go to find out certain areas, whether it be a calendar area, where it be like a meeting like this, or community event, a school event or whatever, they get one via email, they get another one put on the kids' calendar, all that kind of stuff. So putting everything on one helps a lot. If finding one, and just being consistent, because I think that, contributes a lot to, I didn't even know this was going on, because they're so used to looking just in one place for everything. And so I'm glad that you captured that, because I know that's been a frustration, and it's not just this school district that has it, it's a lot of them. But another thing that I hear when I go to post-secondary meetings and sit on different college boards and stuff like that is the fact that as high school progresses, the use of the technology, especially as they go into the latter half of their high school years, becomes almost a crutch, because then all of a sudden they get thrown into a second or a PSEO or a post-secondary education where they're given a syllabus and asked to plan everything out themselves. So I know coming from that side down, there's been a little bit more of teachers not telling them everything they have to do on their homework and laying out, read this chapter tonight and stuff like that, and actually saying, okay, here's a syllabus online. Let's train them to start following it and becoming less dependent on checking the grades, knowing what homework is due, et cetera. And I'm not sure if that was included in any of the feedback or any of the considerations going forward.
I don't think necessarily specifically with this work, but I think in parallel, the teaching and learning department is doing a lot around personalized learning, which I think is going to be that outcome that you're discussing, that ownership of learning, that self-efficacy, that competency is going to be a byproduct of the personalized learning experience where, they're going to have to map out, this is what I want to learn, this is how I'm going to get there to do it. So not necessarily specifically in here, but I think in parallel that conversation is happening.
Any other questions? Michael?
Just one question. Are there families in the district who don't have access to technology at home, and how do we address that when we look at this? And maybe it isn't an issue. I know at the higher levels they have their school-issued iPad, but...
Yeah, some of the survey results have shown that there are families that don't have access to technology, and we're currently looking and working with a couple vendors to see what kind of technologies we could provide through like a checkout process, or whether it's a MiFi or a hotspot or some other tech that would be able to travel with families. But it is something that has come up through the survey and the results, and we are reviewing that.
That's great. I would just hate to see that contribute to achievement gap or anything else, so thank you for that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, did anything surprise you? I mean, did you have anything that was in there that was really unexpected?
Can I take that one?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. No real surprises. I think the results that we reviewed and went through validated some of the things that we thought we're going to see. The inability of Schoology and Infinite Campus to do grade pass back, because you do have that formative grade book in Schoology, and then you have the official grade book in Infinite Campus. And I know both vendors are working on that to provide a solution, but the adoption rate has been minimal at this point. So we're waiting to see. I mean, we're letting other districts beta test, if you will. I mean, there's a couple that we've reached out to say, how is this grade pass back working? And we're gathering that information. But that was one that we knew going in that is a frustration, because you're duplicating work. If you're using Schoology gradebook for formative assessments or other types of assessments, and then you got to take those grades and transfer them into Infinite Campus, which is our official gradebook, it's not efficient. And in a perfect world, we would want those two products to talk to each other and have that grade pass back. It's not there yet. So we're not going to implement something until it's rock solid. Were you surprised by any of the results?
No, I think, it was good to do, and, there are certainly areas for growth, but overall, nothing surprised me.
My other question is, do you feel as though we got good engagement and feedback from the teachers in the process?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, right now we've kind of identified our current reality, and as we move forward with, what does that expectations document look like, that will be done in partnership with the builds as well. So moving forward, we will continue to have that engagement with the staff.
I feel really good about the feedback channels that were used and implemented through this process.
Any other questions?
Just a comment.
Eric? Enrique, I'm sorry.
You can call me Eric, it's okay. No, I just wanted to say that I appreciate you engaging all the different stakeholders, from the parents to the learners at all the different levels, and the built teams at each different level in this process, so that you can come up with a 360-degree data-driven view of what the problems are, and then start driving at solving some of these common problems. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Absolutely.
No other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll move on to the budget update. Julie?
Good evening, board members, Chair Shimmick. Tonight, we're just going to review a little bit about our budget update, and I will give you a little bit of an update on the legislative, a little legislative review as well. A lot of these that you've seen in, for several months now, we've been working on the budget for the past 3 months, continuing to refine this. We're really working on, we finally got numbers for special ed just today, so we'll be bringing a refined number to the next work session. The parameters that the board set would, that we're budgeting on is increasing our gen ed formula by 2% or $126 per pupil unit. That cost is $3 million. That additional revenue for our district would be $3 million. That increases the gen ed aid from $6,312 to $6,438 per pupil unit. We are expecting an enrollment increase of 252 students for next year. So I should say the two pieces combined are $3 million. So I'm going to just step back a little bit for the 2%. 2% of the gen ed formula is only $1.2 million. So the total of $3 million that we will receive in new revenue, only 1.2 of that is due to 2% increase on the formula allowance. And the remainder comes from the additional students that will be attending, that we're planning on attending the district next year. So I just want to clarify that. An increase in special education revenue is about $500,000. We're planning on transporting Aspen students next year, so we'll get some revenue for that as well, and that's about $300,000 if they all are transported. We do see a decrease in our basic skills revenue for next year, and I believe that across the state there is a decrease overall in basic skills revenue. Ours is about $45,000. And there is an increase in our interest revenue that we're planning on for next year, and that's about $30,000. So overall, we're anticipating a total revenue projection of about almost $3.8 million. As we talk about our staffing needs, and the reason I wanted to clarify what the 2% brought, just wages and benefits, looking at a 4-year average cost is $2.8 million for us. And so $1.2 million that we're anticipating due to the 2% increase on the formula allowance certainly doesn't cover our ongoing costs. And so that's why we're constantly looking at what are ways that we can continue to have additional revenue come into the district. And one of those ways is because we have additional students coming in. So that does certainly help us to offset those, our wages and benefit, just our ongoing expenses. Due to additional staff, students that we have, we also have additional staffing needs. And you've approved a lot of these already as we've gone these last couple of months. So we had 8.7 regular FTE for regular education, about $550,000. 6 custodial staff, and that is due to the increase in space that we'll anticipate over the next 2 years. We really will need them to help us in this transition year, moving furniture and moving things around, helping us get organized for opening of all our buildings in the fall of 2020. We have 1.8 FTE at Loyola Del Lago for secretary. They're now a full school, K-5 school, so that equalizes them with all the other elementary schools. 3.9 FTE special ed teaching, $321,750. You heard earlier tonight that some of that is part-time positions that we had this year or long-term sub positions that we had this year, that we have paid part of that in the current year, but it was never a full-time position. And now those will be full-time positions for next year. We have a 0.5 social worker at Loyola Del Lago as well, and that brings them in line with all the other K-5 buildings as well. 1 FTE in technology at $75,000. That was part of our referendum dollars. As our technology needs increase and as we're opening these additional buildings, we'll need those staff as well. We have a restructure of assessment and data staff at $20,000. And then we have an assistant HR at $120,000. Additional expenditures on top of that due to increasing our spaces. We're about $220,000 in utility costs, custodial budget increases, and supply budgets, and transportation increases due to additional costs for activities. $125,000 for additional buses for new students in Aspen. That's what we're anticipating right now, and we'll see how enrollment goes this over the summer, and if we have a need, we'll be bringing that request back to the board. And then $600,000 of allocation out of our operating capital for construction, and then that was board approved at the time of the referendum. And then the additional $200,000 I anticipate will come next year. So total all expenditures are $5,225,500. So you can see that we're spending more than what we have for revenue coming in. A lot of that has to do with hiring those staff a little bit early before the fall of 2020. Additional activities, we'll be bringing some information to the next work session about activity costs and some needs that we have there, both in terms of expenditures and revenues to cover those costs. And also, we've talked in the past couple months about increasing our achievement and integration levy this fall to help us cover some of the costs that we have needs to help us with our achievement and closing that achievement gap. And so we are looking at some options, and here's just one scenario. If we were to increase that levy by $200,000, that'd be a 0.5% increase in our levy certification. So we have a lot more authority than that, but we are looking at just that option of $200,000. And we're also looking at open enrollment for the 2020-2021 school year and beyond. And I'll be bringing more information about that in the next board work session. And just to talk just a little bit about what's happening at the legislature. As you know, the governor's target is about $720 million. The House is $900 million, and the Senate is only $206.5 million. The governor is still a 3 and a 2, 3% in the first year of the biennium on the gen ed revenue, and 2% in the second year of the biennium. And he also has $91 million for special ed. That $91 million that's out there for special education, our district would receive about $311,000 of that revenue. That certainly doesn't go very far in covering our $6 million cross subsidy that our district has. What it does do is it probably prevents that cross subsidy from going from $6 million to $606.3 million. That's all that really does. It keeps our cross subsidy the same just by increasing that. If there isn't anything, then that cross subsidy will probably increase by that $300,000. What that cross subsidy means is that's money that is coming out of our general education aid and wouldn't be able to be used for regular education. It would only have to be used for special education. So it's really important that we see some revenue coming in for our special education cross subsidy. One of the issues that they're seeing at the legislature, and I'm not sure how many of you know that, but Minnesota actually is growing in student population. And so what they see when they're looking at the budgets is that there's a growth simply because of additional students. They have additional costs at the legislature. And so they really believe districts are receiving a lot more money because they're seeing it go out of their coffers, of course. But what's happening is it's not more money. It's the same amount of money per students. We just have more students. And so you see that we're a recipient of those additional dollars, but it's not any more money per student. It's the same amount of money per student. There's just a few more students. I hope that made some sense there. So for our district, on the basic revenue, the Senate, we would only see about, if we were to get the Senate 0.5, but we would only receive about $311,000 compared to our 1.2 that we're showing. So it's quite a bit of difference here for if the Senate, if it passes only at the 0.5. And it would really hurt our fund balance at on the bottom line, or we'd have to really look at what other options we have available for our district. Some unfunded mandates that I see coming up. They're looking at setting up a reserve for student activities, which I think is a really interesting, I don't know why they're looking at that. Our general fund, and I think the majority of school districts in the state of Minnesota, it's not fully covered by the fees. You know, so we're already supplementing our activities by our general fund. And so when they set up that reserve, you'll see a negative there is what you would see of how much money is being used for activities. The one positive I did see is there is some referendum equalization in both the House and Senate. A tier 1 increase from about $510,000 to $650,000, which would help our district out a little bit. So those are just a quick update. Any questions about any of the budget or legislative?
Questions from the board? Michael?
I don't know if you can answer this. It's my first time through the legislative budget process. Is there, I know our admin team and through MSBA, we've done a high level of advocacy. Is there much response, have you seen in past years, to rallying the parents and the community to be phoning in as well? Or is that not worth the time and effort?
It absolutely is worth the time and effort. It's important, and I think you get alerts that say action alerts sometimes in your emails and say contact your legislators, and those are important. They do want to hear. We've actually gotten responses back from my organization, from the senators, and the representatives saying, stop, we've heard you. So they do listen.
Do we advocate to our larger population, though, our families and that sort of thing, to call in, or is that going over the line?
We haven't done that in the past.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that they know what they're advocating for sometimes.
I wasn't as aware of the importance of this until I became a board member.
Right.
And I've been in the district all these years.
Because
so.
school finance sometimes is so difficult in Minnesota that it's hard for people to understand what they're advocating for.
Thank you.
It'd be more of we need the money from the state.
Okay, thank you for that.
Are there any other questions?
How are we coming with our kindergarten online enrollment process?
We're really looking at that. We're still short quite a few students in our kindergarten enrollment. We've actually called all of the students that we have that we know that are in our district right now, and we received responses from them. We currently are about 50 students short at our kindergarten, and I'm not sure that we'll see them, and that's a concern on my part. We are, you know, I try not to get too worried about it at this time. We're still really early, but when I compare to where we were this time last year to where we are currently, we're short 50 students, and we continue. It's been that way, and I thought for a while that maybe it was due to our online enrollment, but I may be wrong about that as well. We have a lot of parents saying that their students are summer babies, and so are they going to wait? So we may have a dip one year. I'm not really sure. You know, last year we had higher kindergarten than I anticipated, and I don't know if it's just one of those transitions or, you know, but we may also see them come in over the summer months and as they move in and parents make decisions.
Any other questions? Thanks, Julie. I think you have the next item as well.
So the next item is our purchase order approval, and we would like to be able to, we do this every year, and before the board approves the final budget in June, we would like to prepare all of those purchase orders and get them set up and ready to go and sent out to our vendors. Those purchase orders all say that they can't bill us, nor can we receive any of the items before July 1st. So they can't bill us before July 1st, nor will we receive the items. But we are able to then send out the purchase orders and get them on order, so we get them in a timely manner.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the issuance of the 2019-20 purchase orders?
So made.
By Stacy. Second.
Second.
By Jonathan. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Next is the radon testing results report. That's Maureen.
Evening, Chair Schimick, Dr. Stallo, member of the board. I am doing a summary report of the radon testing that we've done in the district this year. We test all of our buildings, both owned and leased. They're all on a rotation, so every building is tested within 6 years. We're not required to test by MDH, but we do it anyway. And when you do test, you are required to report the results. So that's what this is. Part of the reporting requirements are that we give a summary of those results to the school board. So this is part of our reporting requirements. The other reporting requirements are that we submit all of the raw data, so all of the tests and all of the lab reports, building maps with the test areas identified, and any follow-up testing or mitigation that we might have done. So this year, we tested at the schools of Edgewood, Glendale, Prior Lake High School, Red Tail Ridge, and Westwood. 242 tests in total this year. Of those tests, we had 2 tests at Red Tail and 20 tests at Westwood come back with higher than 4 picocuries per liter, which is the action level. So action level, according to MDH mandates, is that you need to take an action to dilute the amount of radon in the atmosphere. So typical recommendations for that are to, the quote is, dilution is the solution. So increase the ventilation either by increasing the time frame that you ventilate a space and or by increasing the cubic feet per minute. So we took those actions in all of those spaces, and all of our test results at the end of our process were below the 4.0 picocuries per liter in all of our spaces. Our next round of testing will be at 5 Hawks, Greenwood, Hidden Oaks, Jeffers Pond, and Twin Oaks, and that will be 2 years from now. Questions about any of that?
Are there any questions from the board?
All right,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Now we move on to the joint powers agreement. Did you want to take that, Terry?
I'm happy to take that. The Southwest Metro Integration District Joint Powers Agreement does not align perfectly with its bylaws. Specifically, if a new school district seeks to join Southwest Metro, the Joint Powers Agreement would call for a simple majority of the Southwest Metro Board to approve the membership, while the bylaw would require a 2/3 majority for admission as a new member. So the Southwest Metro Board Administration and member district superintendents agreed that the most appropriate standard would be the requirement of the 2/3 majority for admission to a new district. This requires a change, though, in the Southwest Metro Joint Powers Agreement, as noted in the resolution before you this evening. And then, since it is a resolution, it does need to be voted on by all Metro members' school boards. So tonight, we're seeking approval on this resolution.
Do I have a motion to approve the resolution as presented? So by Melissa, second.
Second.
By Mary. Any comments or questions?
I sit on the Southwest Metro Board and support the decision.
Anyone
That was
else?
My question was, does Darren Kermes agree to this? And
Yes.
okay, I'm good.
Okay, this is a roll call vote. Michael?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Jonathan? Stacy? Aye. Mary?
Aye.
Enrique?
Aye.
That motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Moving on to policy, and I believe these are Julie's. I think these are the same policies that came forward in our work session. And I see that 2 of them could go together. One's a policy, one's a procedure, and the third one is a resolution, so roll call, so they'll be separate. Does anyone have any questions on these policies or the resolution?
Are we taking 7-10 together with the policy
Well,
and the
we could take
procedure?
710 with the procedures for 710 together,
That makes sense.
if everyone's all right with that. Do I have a motion to approve policies 710 and 710 procedures?
So made.
By Stacy, second.
Second.
By Mary. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That motion carries 710. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution adopting post-insurance debt compliance policy for tax-exempt and tax-advantaged governmental bonds.
So moved.
By Jonathan, second?
Second.
By Michael. Any comments or questions? That's a roll call vote then. Michael?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Aye.
Jonathan? Stacy? Aye.
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And that resolution passes 7-0. On to administrative reports. Terry?
Thank you very much. At Prior Lake Savage Area Schools, our mission is to educate all learners to reach their full potential as contributing and productive members of our ever-changing global community. And tonight I'd like to highlight some of the work in which we've been engaged to reach that mission. Our annual Community Crisis Response Team meeting was held on April 19th, and this is a chance for our administrative team, along with School Board Chair Shimmick, to meet with our local emergency responders, including police, fire departments, Scott County Emergency Management, and Illini Ambulance, so that we can stay connected and to continue to establish coordinated responses to any potential crisis that we may experience. Each year we choose a topic for our tabletop exercise to discuss a simulated emergency situation. This year we chose parent reunification protocols as our topic. As an administrative team, we will be conducting some follow-up work this summer as a result of our key learning from this meeting. At our last study session, I provided you with a summary of our third annual parent, staff, and student survey results. The survey results are now posted on our website, and the results have been shared with all staff and with parents in our district. We also met as an administrative team to begin to go over those results, and our next step will be to use the data to set goals and improvement plans as we study and plan for the upcoming year. I want to congratulate Hidden Oaks and Twin Oaks staff and administrators on being recognized as a 2019 Sustained Exemplar PBIS school. You've seen some presentations on PBIS and one of the ways that we work on social emotional learning and clear expectations with our students. This award recognizes the PBIS team and staff who are committed to implementing this work that help improve school safety, promote positive behavior, and help students develop socially and emotionally. So congratulations. And lastly, I missed Laker Pride, but I want to extend my thanks and appreciation to Charlotte Huntington as well. I've always known that being a senior in high school is crazy busy, but this is the first year I've lived with a senior in high school, so I understand it at a very different level. Charlotte, what you've done in the classroom, what you've done in all of your extracurricular activities, what you've done leading the student council, and what you've done to contribute and to support our work is phenomenal. So thank you, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. Any other administrative reports? Okay, moving on to board reports. Michael, did you have any?
Just briefly, Stacy may speak to it more. We went to both MSBA Level 3 and Level 4 training the past 2 weeks, and I found those sessions even far more helpful than Level 1 and Level 2 were. So I was becoming a more effective school board and engaging your community, both very timely. This month, my one-on-one with Dr. Stallo was spending the afternoon touring the middle schools, and we got to see some firsthand examples of how we're doing student-centered learning. We got to get some feedback from teachers, not only on those approaches, but technology and how they're using it, and it was very helpful to have that extended time in there. And finally, the early childhood group met last week, and they're doing some really great work. I won't bore you with it, but on assessment and how to build more effective in-depth assessment at those earliest years that can then help us track those students in the years to come. So,
Jonathan, do you want to speak to the finance or the facilities at all? Mostly just updates. But
Yeah, it was updates. Florp was updates and where things are coming, and really nothing newsworthy.
Okay. Stacy?
Like Michael said, I was with her on those, and I would say, I hadn't been to a training in a while. I've done 1 and 2 like twice, I think. And those get a little glossy-eyed. But 3 and 4, I have to say, I would encourage everyone, or people, if you have time, to go see that and do it. It was actually really good, and I was really
surprised at how many people were first year. So, I mean, they just got in and they're already on level 4, which is good. I mean, because I think things have changed as being a school board member over the years, especially for me, over the last 10 years they have. So there's been relevant stuff. I think self-evaluation for boards, that was really interesting to get MSBA. So that's one thing that I know I wanted to speak with you about and stuff. So I think that was really, really helpful, so I'd encourage anyone to take them. And then on my meeting this month, I went to Jeffers and Westwood, and I kind of themed it around looking at individualized, personalized learning, what does that mean? And then I wanted to see the different seating options that people are coming with and stuff, and how, it was pretty fun to see the way they're using them, you know, from like a handmade thing to a fancy little plastic chair, which I feel I could never get in and out of, you know, that kind of thing. But it was pretty fun to see how they're being used and just how, you know, the classroom has changed and how kids interact in the space and things like that. So it was really neat.
Charlotte?
The first thing I want to touch on is we had prom on the 27th of April, and that was super fun. We had it at the Marriott in Minnetonka, and the Grand March was at the high school. Alongside, we also had Celebrate this weekend for the choir team, which I heard went really well. I wasn't able to attend, but I heard they did really well, and it was super fun. For student council, we have our spring events going on right now. So we have paint war, talent show, spike ball, dodgeball, badminton, surf and turf, and an outdoor movie, all for students to enjoy in their last couple weeks of school here. These next 2 weeks are AP testing. I took my first AP test today. So students are starting to take those, and it's a very exciting time.
Never heard them say exciting.
So yeah, we're just winding down in this last quarter of the school year. Finals coming up. Our last day of school is June 6th, and commencement is June 7th. And I just wanted to give a thank you to the school board, Chair Shimmick, and Dr. Stalla for a great year, as this is my last meeting.
Don't forget your name tag, or name marker.
And can I give my board
Mary?
report now? Okay. First of all, I did read over the notes from Fleur, and I agree with Jonathan. The curriculum meeting, we did start the process of seeing the updates to the progression of La Ola del Lago and the Spanish immersion going into the middle school. Talked briefly about potential plans for SAGE, although those weren't as developed. The other thing we kind of talked about was the introduction of the MTSS, which is a multi-tiered system of support. We talked about what was going on with that, how we're going to start to measure that. And of course, that's just now getting started, so we'll probably hear more about that next year, but that's pretty important considering the need for social and emotional development going forward, particularly since a lot of the emphasis right now is at the elementary school. And as was pointed out by me and laughed at by some others, is that, you know, we do kind of need to continue that through middle school and high school, especially given the advent of puberty and a few other things that changes quite a bit, and their ability to handle the changes that go on in middle school and high school. And then Kevin gave the same PDSA literacy update that we heard tonight in the curriculum meeting, a little bit more detailed on the aspect, because a couple years ago, people on the curriculum committee actually got to see the different phonics programs and the reading programs and actually experience the books going back and forth. And to see that to come to fruition at the elementary level was pretty interesting in how it actually developed. Now it's the challenge is to move that into the middle and high school area, particularly with English language literacy, and as he mentioned tonight, trying to encourage more English journalism or combined courses to be taken going into middle and high school as part of the electives.
None of my committees met since the last board meeting. However, I did have the opportunity to go to Glendale and be a mystery reader, and that was tremendous fun, getting to see all the different pods, touring around Glendale, seeing all the different seating arrangements and the different ways that students are learning It's not just sitting in an old wooden desk with the flip-up lid and, you know, the pencil's right there and the little sharpener. There's lots of different ways to learn and to engage those learners where they are in a capacity where they're able to really receive the education best. So that was fantastic to see. I also had an opportunity to meet with Deb Anderson of the Director of Special Education, and we talked through a variety of different things, including MTSS. I won't stumble through that acronym again. And also kind of throwing down a gauntlet to see what opportunities there are within the district to engage our co-curricular teams to deliver, you know, STEM solutions back into the district for those with special needs or those who have mobility needs, some sort of barrier so that we can really take that education, bring it right back home for each one of those learners and do something positive for other learners, their peers, their friends, friends of their siblings.
One more thing, I want to congratulate the high school Knowledge Bowl team for winning state.
Cool. Okay, I want to again wish Charlotte the best as she moves forward. It's exciting times for her. Remind the board that the superintendent evaluations are due this week. Is it Thursday or?
May 8th.
May 8th, okay, Wednesday. So please get those in if you haven't done them already. And our board retreat is June 20th. To make sure you still have that on your calendar. And I guess I need to say, based on all of the comments earlier this evening in our work session, that I would encourage all board members to kind of get their thoughts together, and if you want to send information to myself or to Dr. Stallo and the administrative team regarding the boundary changes, please do so sooner than later, so we can continue moving in the right direction. I got to put these on. Future events, the district retirement celebration is May 16th at Twin Oaks, 3:30 to 5. Our next school board study session is May 20th. There is no school for Memorial Day, May 27th. The last day of school is June 6th, and as Charlotte said, graduation is June 7th at 7:30 at the high school. If there's no other agenda items, we are going to go into closed session, so I need a motion to adjourn the open part of our meeting.
So made.
I'll second by Stacy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries 7-0.